Good morning. Good morning to those who are streaming. So, I was taught never to say, shut up. And whenever I hear somebody say, shut up, I am monumentally offended. I think it's terrible. I'm aghast. It's so harsh. It's so distasteful. It's not good. And that's what makes Jesus so great. And that's what makes this gospel in particular so great. So when you start to really get in to what Jesus is doing, you just have to reevaluate everything, including shut up. So the story that Father John just read, the stilling of the storm, is probably one of the most well-known Jesus stories in the world. It's one of the most rendered stories in art, and we know the story well. And Jesus is asleep on the back of the boat, and he wakes up and he stills the storm, and he begins stilling the storm, and it says in the scriptures, he rebuked the wind. Now, when I read that, all I can think of is the biblical translators must be a lot like my mom, because that's actually not what it says. What it really says is, Jesus woke up and he said to the storm, shut up. Okay? And this is not the first time in the gospel that Jesus says, shut up. So you may remember that in the beginning of Mark's gospel, Mark gets us off to a bang, 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 bang way through Jesus' life. And Jesus is in Capernaum, which is where he makes his home once he leaves Nazareth. And he's in the synagogue and he's teaching. And it says that he teaches as one with authority, not as the scribes. And while he's teaching, a man enters into the synagogue who is possessed by a demon. And while Jesus is teaching, he would be seated, because in antiquity the teacher sat. The man with the demon starts to call out and say, I know who you are. You're the Holy One of Israel. What do you have to do with us? And the text says, be quiet, said Jesus sternly. Come out of him. But that's actually, as you can guess now, that's actually not what it says. It says that Jesus said, shut up, and come out of him. And then it says that the impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. So it's really important to see that the way we get, how we read the Bible goes through translations, and then it goes through what we learn in church. I mean, I never learned in 4th grade CCD that Jesus said, shut up. And my mom, I talked my way out of CCD, which was my only childhood victory with my mom. But I just didn't get this. And if you read really, really closely, what you get is that Jesus is a very earthy guy. And that his spirituality is a very earthy spirituality. And one of the things Mark is trying to teach us about Jesus. That's the purpose of the gospel. And one of the things Mark is trying to teach us about is what Jesus has authority over. This is an authority question. It's a big deal. And Jesus has authority over that which is destroying us, the noise which is destroying us. Okay, back to the story. So it says that a great storm arose, and the word for great, the Greek word for that is where we get mega. So it is a mega storm. And after he tells the wind to shut up, the Bible tells us, Scripture tells us, he said to the sea, peace, be still. Which, of course, as you can get now, isn't exactly what it says. He says to the sea, shalom, be still. Now, we all know that shalom works as a greeting or a goodbye. I mean, if you are, or peace, I mean, if you're in the state of Israel and you see one of your Jewish friends, you greet him or her with, shalom or shalom, shalom. And perhaps you do that with your friends in the United States. But what we render as peace in English doesn't do this justice. So the peace of shalom is not just the absence of war or conflict, or chaos. The peace of shalom is this super holistic peace, and it has at its core the realities of being a human being, which is to say, our lives are wildly complex, and there are many, many moving pieces and parts, and it all gets put into our emotional blenders and our family systems. And we all know that life has storms. Some of the storms are terrifying and terrible, and some of the storms are fatal. I mean, this is the Buddha's first insight after he sits under the Bandi tree for so long, which is the one thing we all share as human beings is suffering. And that this suffering disrupts and disturbs and disquiets. It makes a shambles of the shalom. And so Jesus knows that we need to be restored to the state of shalom, the state of peace. And it might be, peace and wholeness and delight and completeness, welfare and safety and harmony, a sense that the pieces of our life fit together, that we have a gratitude and a gratefulness and a connectivity and a joy and wonder in our life. That's all in shalom. So when you say shalom to somebody, you are wishing that blessing upon them. Now, again, what we read and what's in your bulletin, it says, peace, exclamation point, be still, exclamation point. And if you're following along in the Revved Up for Sunday podcast, you've probably got by now that that's not in the original. That's not in the original of the text. So in the original of the text, there's not only no exclamation points, there's no punctuation at all, and there's no verses and no chapters, and sometimes no spaces between the words. Anyway, this is added by the translators in a way to say Jesus is trying to be heard over the noise of the wind and the sea. And so he doesn't yell at the sea per se. He greets the water with shalom. Now, what he is saying to the water is, it has to do with a holistic peace. And this is to demonstrate, if you think about Jesus, it's a very cool thing to spend a lot of time thinking about Jesus. What is Jesus like on the inside? What is Jesus' being like? And Jesus' being is so aligned with the divine, who he calls Father in intimacy, that he is aligned completely with the so-called, the verticalness of God and the horizontalness of all things, all people, and that includes the natural world. So he speaks to the natural world like he's speaking to a person. He says, shalom. And I have stumbled on a new version of the Bible. I'm not making this up, by the way. This sounds like I'm making this up, but I'm not making this up. And then I can't say it with a straight face. The name of the version is Simplified Cowboy Version. Now, this is a kind of home on the range version of the Bible, kind of sitting around the campfire. And I really love it because biblical studies is such a snobby world. It's such a stuffy, highfalutin place that home on the range really gets it. And this is how the Simplified Cowboy Version tells us what happened here. And catch this. Jesus lifted up on one elbow. I love that. He didn't even get up. He just on one elbow. And said to the storm, cut it out and be still. And the winds immediately stopped and all the clouds disappeared. It was as calm as if nothing had happened. So this kind of reminds me of a parent talking to the kids, tell them to quit fighting and be quiet because wants to watch the basketball game or something like that. So Mark is trying to teach us that Jesus not only has authority over that which is bad, he also is himself shalom incarnate. Now, we get the shalomness of Jesus, the peace of Jesus, the calmness of Jesus, because, he's asleep on the cushion in the back of the boat. And we also know that every Christmas, particularly if you go to the world's greatest Christmas pageant, you'll hear quoted Isaiah talking about the Messiah who is going to be the Prince of Peace. But what Isaiah really says is the Messiah will be the Prince of Shalom. And so it's not just the Prince of no conflict, but it's the Prince of a holy wholeness where everything fits together as in our humanity with other people, with the Creator, with the natural environment where it all fits together. So after Jesus calms the storm, it says that the wind ceased and there was a dead calm. And the word translated for great storm and dead calm is the same word, mega. And so it is mega calm. Going back to Jesus, what is Jesus like? Not what does Jesus teach, but what is Jesus like? And so Jesus in his being has this shalom and an enormous capacity for this mega calm. And he brings peace with the weirdest combination of word to word. Shut up, shalom. It's the only place I've ever seen anybody using shut up and shalom back to back. And that Jesus himself is this tremendous peace. So some of you may remember, I've spoken a lot about Mary C. Neal lately, and some of you know why. This is the woman who died for 31 minutes, and her experience, very interested in her experience of Jesus, and then later caught up in an out-of-body experience with Jesus in the heavens. And what does she say? But that Jesus, everyone asks her, she's a spine surgeon. What does Jesus look like? And she always says that our categories of look like don't fit what Jesus looks like. And that Jesus looks like all compassion. That's what he looks like. He looks like compassion. And that he looks like all of the pain of the world and all of the joy and love of the world gathered in one human being. And she said, that doesn't answer the question exactly, but that's what he looks like. And so Jesus, this person who has all this in him, takes on the storm with the shut up shalom. And I just have to say that when we enter into this story, who amongst us doesn't want Jesus to say to us, shut up, shut up. We've all had this experience of waking up in the middle of the night, and it is awful. Our fears, they blow in like the winds of the storm. It's just like the disciples in the boat. There's no light. All takes place in darkness, and there's no land to ground yourself. You can't put your feet on the ground. Maybe we should all just get out of bed and put our feet on the ground, but we don't most of us. And we are battered by the winds of fear. Battered. Old tapes, self-defeating thoughts. And how often have you experienced that you think you're just going under? You're just going to fall into the abyss. It's over. Down you go. And what St. Augustine says about this passage is that when that happens, Jesus is asleep in our boat, in the boat of our psyche. And that we would do well to awaken Jesus and not depend on our own thoughts, right? You know how it goes this runs from 2 to like 4:43 before, and in the Message, which is another amazing translation of the Bible, it says, the wind ran out of breath. I love that, because that's sometimes when our fears, it's like at 4:43, the wind of fear runs out of its breath and you get another hour. And not only would it not be cool to hear Jesus break in and say to us, shut up. But how great it would be here to Jesus say, Shalom. To give us what we desire at the core of our being, which is this holy, whole roundness of peace where we belong to ourselves. The pieces of our lives fit together. We understand how they see communion with the divine and with all of our neighbors. This is the very purpose of contemplative prayer. It is to quiet and still the noisy storm, to slowly over time to get it to shut up and to drop down into shalom. As it says, the psalmist says, be still and know that I am God. For we are all battered by the waves of life. It's just not possible not to be battered by the waves of life. But what Augustine wants us to know is Jesus can handle our waves. Wake him up. And even if we cannot be calm, we just can't be calm, hold on to Jesus, who himself is mega shalom and mega calm. Shalom.